even though we've got people that are involved with other interim topic committees, we'll go ahead and do that.
Representative Allemand,
Present.
Representative Aldred,
Here.
Representative Banks,
Here.
Representative Conrad,
Excuse.
Representative Crago,
Here.
Representative Davis,
Here.
Representative Slagle,
Present.
Representative Winter,
He's here.
Senator French,
Excused.
Senator Hicks,
Excused, and we hope he'll show up.
Senator Ide,
Excused.
Senator Kolb,
Present.
Chairman Eklund,
Here.
and Chairman Steinmetz.
Here.
Okay, so committee, I think we will. Dan, that's right.
And
got-
we have one more, Linda. Thank you, Dan. We have Senator Larson, who has been added to the Senate Ag Committee as well. Welcome, Senator Larson.
Yes. So I think, I don't know if Representative Heiner's here, and they are busy with minerals this morning anyway. So we have an idea, the rest of the committee, the House part has an idea of what he's doing here. And we'll start with it. As we started looking into elk feeding and the brucellosis problem that's on the west side of the state and the elk moving into the feed grounds, we started wondering if there was enough animal reimbursement money in the program to take care of the people on the west side that have to deal with occasional outbreaks of brucellosis. So that triggered the idea, since we couldn't really deal with it, we didn't have a bill on the table to deal with it then or amend it. We thought we might review it during the interim. Is there anything that the committee'd want to add to that? Director True, would you want to, you have anything you'd be good with coming and continuing our education on brucellosis and the possibility of changing the amount of money that's in that program or available in that program? Okay, the next one we're going to wait a little bit on. Mr. Wentland was here. He was going to talk about it a little bit. It was brought by Lynn Hutchings. And this would be a possibility for select water as well. It's proposed, I don't know if all the audience has, I should have started that way. But this is a proposed topic: groundwater control areas, groundwater urban subdivision development protection, and update required by the state engineer modeling. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm in such an area of that where we're in a part of my representative district is in a control area, part of it's in a conservation area, and it's groundwater that we're dealing with here. And I think, I don't know if the state engineer is, Brandon, did you want to come up and comment on this possibility and where you think it should go? Because we have the option, select water, which is closely tied to here.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the Senate Ag Committee thought this and a couple of others on our list should be referred to select water.
Okay, I guess it's already been dealt with.
That was just our recommendation, subject to what the joint committee would decide, but that was the position of the Senate.
Okay. Is the House okay with that? I don't see any objection, so I think that'll work just fine. The next, going down the list. Temporary in-stream flows.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
we also recommended that the temporary in-stream flows provided by Senator Case be referred to select water as well.
House Committee, you're fine with that? Sounds like a good plan. Continuing on down, wild horse management. I think we've got a couple people that have proposed that. Right now, we have John Winter here. Why don't you share with us a little vision you have for that? You're kind of the authority on the House Committee with these wild horses.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my opinion that, and I think it can be substantiated, that the wild horses in Wyoming, and I know in other states as well, are about to get to the point where the range out there isn't going to be worth anything. We have livestock that are permitted to be out there, and right now the wild horses are just inundating the whole range out on the Red Desert, in the checkerboard area primarily, where it's 50% private land. And so it's my opinion that we need to do something drastic at this point to get the attention of our federal land management agencies who have not done their job, and it's not necessarily the fault of these agencies necessarily, because they've had a lot of problems over the years trying to provide for roundups and taking care of the things that are necessary out there on the range. However, the Congress doesn't seem to be interested in it, and we need to get their attention in some way. And it's kind of come to the point where we need to involve some legal action and hopefully get our governor on board with this, and I think he is. But we need to really push this thing in such a manner as that we can involve the University of Wyoming, which will be a great asset to us. But right now, we have a problem out there, and I think this winter is going to show just how bad it is, especially on their Indian reservation. We've had lots of snow, and the forage has not been good, and we're going to see the results of that, I'm sure, and not only on the reservation, but in other areas where these horses are frequent. So I'd try to answer any questions if anybody had any, but this is something we really need to get serious about. And in order to do it correctly, and in order for everybody to understand the real problem, we've got to go out there and have a tour. And this is going to take some time to do a tour and to really discuss these situations that are current out there on the range. So if you got any questions, I'd be try to answer them. Thanks.
Committee, any questions? And at any time, if the public has input to bring into it, just flag us down and we'll bring you into the conversation. Thank you, John. So committee, it looks like both the Senate and the House is interested in doing this. So we'll add that as a joint topic. We're all okay with that? Good. No? Okay. That's okay. No. Okay, well, that's fine. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm all for getting something done, but sending a letter that we don't like what you're doing is not what I'm interested in. We can come up with something that's effective and that actually has a result. I'm all for that. I just didn't want to personally waste committee time on something that we're just saying we don't like what you're doing. That's my concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, we're hoping that it'll trigger something more effective.
Mr.
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chairman,
Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree. I think just sending a letter isn't gonna cut it. So I hope we delve into this and have some other suggestions.
Yeah, my hope is that we don't waste any time with it. So we used some of our, I believe it was COVID funding to help the two tribes round up horses on the reservation. And they ship those things out because they have the authority to do whatever. They're a sovereign. They were able to do that. So we can do there are ways. Yeah, that'd be an option. We'd get in trouble for it, but trucking the horses to the reservation, let them deal with it is probably not a very good idea, but seems logical. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we all want to reduce numbers and so forth, but the real situation is that there is no place to go with these horses. The federal government will not provide inspectors at these slaughterhouses, and there's no place to send these horses right now. It's my understanding that the slaughterhouses in Canada have closed, and there's no place in the United States that will do this or can do it. And so we're in a bad situation. There's no place to go with them. The Adopt a Horse program is not working very well anymore. People have got all the horses they can stand. And there's just so many things that have gone awry that we have to approach it from a different point of view, I guess, and really figure out just what to do. And it's going to take some time to figure it out, I really believe. So I wish we had some answers right now, but we just need to figure that out.
Representative Davis.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I see there's an issue here, but this issue has got further reaching, it boils down to the rancher, to the, all horses in general. There is no place to go with a horse that is no longer serviceable. So it has, what we do here may have further reaching ramifications, but it's a big issue across the whole United States, not just with our feral horses.
And there has been talk of trying to set up a slaughterhouse on the reservation and maybe fund a state inspector or something to do that. We haven't delved into that very deeply. That's one place. It's kind of centrally located in the state, and they would be interested in doing it. And I think that might be part of what we work on as a solution and maybe legislation. Is the committee okay with going ahead and bringing it? I think as a whole we are. I know the concerns, but I think it's worth a little bit more time spent. All right. Next topic for consideration. Where am I at? Okay. Can you share that with us, Chairman Steinmetz? Hicks isn't here.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Hicks has arrived.
There you are.
If you would like him to share his topic about the review of federal cooperative extension service funding. Senator Hicks?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman. I just think that we get a certain number of federal funds that come through the cooperative extension funding. I'm interested, and I think this ties into the other topics as far as looking at the University of Wyoming, how those funds are deployed through the university and then out to the counties, and just to evaluate those and make sure that they're meeting the original purpose for what they were designated for. I think it dovetails in with looking at some of the other endowment topics with universities. So it would be kind of an overall view if we roll those in as some of the financing the programs and how they're operating. But I think this is an important component that the committee should look at and see if we're maximizing the best use of those funds through the cooperative extensive service and how they're being expended.
Thank you. And Chairman Eklund, I think that does dovetail into some of the topics on page 5 that were proposed by the House as well, dealing with the agricultural endowment and the University of Wyoming Ag College endowment that you have proposed, that we could maybe look at the University of Wyoming Ag programs as a block, is what we were considering.
That's good with me. What about the rest of the committee? It's my hope that we might be able to have one of the meetings in Laramie, tour the Ag College, also the vertical farming operation that's in the city of Laramie at the same time. And I would love for the committee to develop some vision on where we think the Ag College could really benefit the third biggest industry in the state of Wyoming. Representative Crago, can you talk a little about the endowment? You were the one that proposed that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we had brought forth a bill. It was during session, and obviously we didn't get it across the finish line. And so I just had thrown that on here as one of the interim topics. It was House Bill 271. It was just, the purpose of it was to set up an endowment to support the College of Agriculture and support the land grant functions of the College of Agriculture. As we all know, it's the college has seen some changes over the last couple of years, and not all of those are related to land grant functions. And so I really wanted to focus on that. And my thought was, there's no reason that University of Wyoming shouldn't have the best College of Agriculture in the Western United States. And so that's really what I was trying to do, is move us forward. There's a lot of, I know it helps our industry, I guess. This committee's ag helps our industry and helps the kids that we all know and have raised. And so that was sort of my idea. I think the cooperative extension funding works into that. I think we're gonna have to study that. I mean, that was one of the things that was actually included in the bill. So I think we could study that as part of this. We could study all of the funding mechanisms that happen in the College of Ag as part of that and just learn more. I mean, I think we're gonna have to do that if we wanna move that idea forward. We're gonna have to know how it all works anyways. And some of us don't, those of us that have not been on appropriations don't know as much as those of you that have. And so I think that would be a helpful learning experience as we look at that endowment. I know the chairman and I both put it on as an interim topic because we think it's important. And actually, I think it'd be good for us all to go over there and learn what happens at the college and see what the programs are and see where we could be helpful in those areas that would move agriculture forward.
Discussion. Chairman Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we would agree. And as you alluded to earlier, how the College of Ag is funded, I think is an important discussion with all of this, because as some of us have been on appropriations, we were looking at the block grant model, and if it's truly working anymore, that started in the 80s. When we started doing that block grant model, and we have some information we can get to the rest of the committee on that. Before that, the legislature was much more involved in directing the funding and what colleges it went to and how it was administered. And so I think that needs to be a part of our discussion.
Okay, is everybody okay with adding that to list of things to do? Looks like it. Okay, next topic. Federal lands? Okay. So we have a topic here, a resolution demand transfer of federal lands with appropriation. Bob's not here yet. Go ahead and fill us in, Chairman. Or
Yes,
any of the-
Mr. Chairman.
Any of the
and
senators.
Yes, Senator French and I'd have a Revenue Committee interim topic meeting, and so they won't be joining us unless they get through early. But Senator Ide had proposed this as a bill, and did not meet the deadlines for that bill to come up this year. So he's done extensive research on the transfer of federal lands and FLIPMA, and he wanted to look at that. I don't know if 10 hours is something that we could accomplish. That is a lot of committee time for one issue, but we know that federal lands are a big issue in the state of Wyoming. The Senate was open to looking at that. So it's, we would take your comments on that now if you'd be open to that. Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chairman. So I guess my question is, what's the resolution we're looking for under that particular topic? What's the action item, so to speak, for the legislature?
Representative Craigo, I think his intention is to find a way that we can work better with our federal partners under FLIPMA, and is that something we want to challenge in the future? Is it something that's still working well for the state of Wyoming, or should the state really be pushing back on that and challenging that act and looking at a repeal?
Any other?
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess my concern is time. I think if we get too many big lifts, we won't have enough time to do it justice. So I think that part of, my recommendation, at least from my point of view, is what can we do? If we're going to talk about wild horses, great. But if we talk about, a bunch of subjects that we can't really effectively address properly, then it's not going to work. So I would like to focus on, if this is a big lift, a huge lift, and a complaint that, honestly, from my area of the state is always been an issue with management of working with the feds. I'd like to do one big thing. I think that's reasonable in my mind. But if we start taking on too many big things, we won't do any of them justice. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Kolb. Representative Allemond.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, it is a big lift, but I think it's one that we ought to try lifting. The benefits that this could do for the people of Wyoming and for the state, I think it's really worth looking at, even if it does take us a day. Thank you.
Further discussion? Further discussion? All right, Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I guess I'm a little maybe confused, because I'm not sure how we, as the legislature, we can't repeal FLIPMA. It's a federal law, and we don't deal in federal laws. If I have a more definitive idea of where we're going, I think I'm along the lines of Senator Kolb. I'm afraid we're gonna spend two or 3 days of interim studying, which I'm fine learning. I mean, if our goal is to learn and educate ourselves, and we're upfront about that, I'm okay with that. But if we go into it believing we're gonna pass legislation that does something, I just don't think that's a good use of our time. Learning, fine, I'm totally okay with that. I just don't, that's why I asked about the action item, and maybe somebody can educate me, because I don't know, but that's what I'm worried about. Same as Senator Kolb, and then on top of that, we have to get it, whatever we do, we have to get it introduced, which is that in itself will be a heavy lift come next session, because it's a budget session.
Thank you, Representative Craigo. Maybe we could scale back a little bit then and get an update from our federal agencies on the act and educate ourselves a little bit. I know that in the past we have brought in our federal agencies, and I was hoping that we would do that again as the Joint Ag Committee. Maybe we could start out by getting an update, educating ourselves, and then if we want to move forward from that, we can. And it might be an ag bill, or it might be an individual bill, or we might just be grappling with the problem that we're facing But would that be acceptable to get an update and more information?
Madam Chairman,
Senator Hicks?
so because my colleague Senator Wright is here, not here, I'll try to, I think what the senator wants to do is there is at least one and maybe a number of states that are looking at a legal challenge in the federal court system. It's about the legitimacy of Flipman when they change from a policy of disposal under the Organic Act and several other federal acts of omission with the states and want to look at it. And so at least one state that I know of is already proceeding and funded the development of a legal strategy how to challenge FLTMA. It won't be state law. It'll be litigation in the federal court system. And so I think his intent was, the last conversation I had with him, is just to look at what the other states are doing, understand FLTMA, see where that legal argument lies within that federal land management and in context to all of these other acts of Congress as far as the disposal, retainage and stuff. So it's to get an education of both the constitutional legal history and how FLTMA changed complete policy. So FLTMA is a Federal Land Management Act that changed the policy from disposal. It was always the idea of the federal government to dispose of the federal domain, and that law changed what some believe is, I don't know if it was the Organic Act, but there's other federal legislation, and that goes back, and part of it, I think it was even part of the Northwest Ordinance that says, no, we were supposed to come in as equal footing with every other state. And every other state, they transferred or sold all those federal lands to the private sector. So I think more than anything, what Senator Ide was trying to get at is this, that we should educate ourselves as to what our neighboring states are doing. What are the ramifications of looking at potential litigation associated with challenging the policy adopted under FLTMA? So I don't know if that's something the committee wants to look at or not, but my last conversation with Senator Ide, that's really what he was focused on.
Thank you for that clarification. How would you like to proceed, Chairman Eklund? Representative Prego?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I guess my comment would be, I don't think that would take 10 hours to do that. I mean, that we could do that in an hour or two and learn a lot and then decide what if we wanted to do anything or not. That's not a 10-hour project. I wouldn't,
Right.
I don't think.
I agree, and I think that sometimes it's hard to grapple with that, how much committee time something takes when you haven't served on an interim committee before. So I think we can reduce that by quite a bit. So, all right, Chairman Eklund, what's your pleasure?
Well, I think it'd be a useful education time, but probably less time. We have been tried this before. And if you ever talk to a chairman that tried to get into the state taking over federal lands or anything like that, it just becomes a bigger issue than you ever. It seems simple enough and it seems reasonable enough, but trying to do it when we're a century past the time when we should have had those lands like the states east of us did, becomes a complicated issue, and we can't really tell the federal government or to make many demands on them. We can suggest things, but I think education would be a good idea. The committee's fairly new, so kind of plan on that. Scale it down a bit.
So, Madam Chairman, I think the final disposition would be a discussion as to whether the state of Wyoming wanted to join in any potential litigation with any of the other western states regarding a federal challenge in federal court with FLTMA. So we would look at the legal arguments, see what an estimated cost is going to cost associated with this, because it'll all be private sector legal firms most likely. It can take a little more legal horsepower and time than probably any one state has the ability to do. So I think that's the discussion that we'll have is here's what FLTMA is. Here's what the legal arguments are to challenge FLTMA. Is the state of Wyoming interested in participating in the lawsuit, and then what's the cost? And I think that's the answer. That'll be the questions that we're going to be asked to answer.
Thank you, Senator Hicks.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, the next one was the evaluate land use regulatory environment. The Senate suggests we refer that to the Corporations Committee.
Okay, that sounds like a better place for it. Can we, if it's okay, I'd like to back up. Mr. Wetland is here. Wait a minute now. So I think have we already decided this is going to, why don't you go ahead and share what you know about this topic that Senator Hutchings has brought with the committee, so we have a better idea of what's going to select water. Several of us are on select water, so.
All right, thank
But
you,
it's
Mr.
going
Chairman.
there?
Yes,
Okay.
but I think to get the committee back to where we're at, we're on page 1. Back to
Oh, I'm
the
sorry.
topic groundwater control areas, groundwater urban subdivision submitted by Senator Hutchings. Just so we all know where we're at. There you go, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Kyle Wentland, and I want to be perfectly clear today. I'm representing myself as a private citizen. I have been working with Senator Hutchings on this for the better part of 2.5 years now. We actually did propose an interim topic on this last year. It was moved off the list with select water. I believe select water is probably the correct place for this to be heard. But what we have is we have exponential growth in the Cheyenne groundwater control area right now. And there is a study that was done for that groundwater control area, and then a sub-study called the AMAC report. And what the study said in the state engineer's review was that a minimum 10-acre lot size is what should be used to have a neutral groundwater draw within the control area. And the county has viewed that there was an example calculation in the sub-study in the AMAC report that said you could look at a 5-acre lot. And what happened was that calculation was an example. It wasn't what was supposed to be used. So there's a disparity between the two studies and the state engineer's order. And then there's also a lack of clarification because these subdivisions are coming in contact with our agricultural producers in our rural areas, the urban sprawl that we're all seeing. And there's a lack of clarification in the interference claims on how that would work. Coupled with that is Cheyenne's growth is really quite explosive right now. When we asked the county commissioners if they could provide us how many 5-acre plots they've plotted, they couldn't actually tell us. And so they've been operating under that. And then if we do run into the water shortage, Cheyenne is very dependent on the Green River Basin and the Colorado River for our water. So if we have to do a water district and find a solution for people that get dewatered from this activity, it's going to be expensive. It's going to cost the state some money. So in order to get ahead of that, we think it's appropriate to take a dive into this and take a hard look at what are we doing here within the groundwater control areas. We don't believe that probably should be expanded beyond those control areas, but we do believe it is important in those control areas, and they may require some additional oversight. I will tell you that the group of citizens that I work with in our rural community and with Senator Hutchins, we have been to the county commission for 2.5 years on this. And they have refused to talk to us. The last time we actually engaged them, we asked them, we said, well, can we come in and sit down with you and look to see for a solution? And the answer was actually not only a no, but a blank no at a public meeting. So we felt at that point we needed to engage Senator Hutchings, and this probably needs to be looked at a little higher level.
Any questions? Thank you. So it'll be a possible select water interim. Okay. Now let's see if we can find our way back. Oh, Representative Alleman, why don't you share with us what you brought during the session on, where you at? There you are, Bill.
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. This is I ran this bill this year and it did not make it through. This is a bill that I look at as U.S. security and safety issue. And what I'm proposing to do is prohibit foreign ownership of land and minerals in the state of Wyoming. And this isn't everybody. I do not want to keep BP out of Wyoming. I don't want to keep shale out of Wyoming. I darn sure don't want to keep the Canadian companies that's developing the Powder River Basin uranium. I don't want to keep the companies that's doing the Trona in the southwest part of the states. The people or the countries and people I want to keep out are the people who threaten us on a daily basis. And that's China, Russia, and states of terror, state sponsors of terror. And we had quite a little testimony in committee how in Arizona, a Chinese company had bought a lot of agriculture land, putting up hay and shipping the hay to China, not being used in Wyoming or Arizona or the United States. We had other testimony of China buying land around our missile bases and our Air Force bases just to spy on us. And I or you cannot buy land or operate businesses in the same countries that I'm wanting to keep out. And that's pretty much what I had to say about it. Thank you.
Questions, committee? Yes. Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I agree with the premise that we don't want our enemies to, I guess, buy our land and use it against us. I think the downside of this is how prescriptive do we have to be to make sure we're not hurting our own Trona mines, in this case, most specifically. We can't just use a shotgun and shoot it out there and kill everybody. We got to go up there and be selective and very well thought out legislation to be that, I don't know, focused on what we're trying to do. It's not easy to write. Things change. We talk about, today we have a certain list of people on the list of terrorism, right? And tomorrow that could change for whatever political reason, which may not be my reason. So I'm very concerned about writing any legislation of this magnitude, but once again, a huge lift. If you get into the details, not simple, not easy. And I'm concerned that we're doing something that's gonna backfire and hurt us, certainly hurt the Trona industry, which I stand, with and try to protect what they do for the jobs in my county. And so I am very concerned about this type of legislation. It's the reason probably why it didn't make it, is because just how broad it was. We have to be very careful. And judiciary might be corporations might be a better place for this. I'm concerned. I wonder why it's here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, well, so we had testimony there. Go ahead, Representative Altman.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, there's only 4 countries that's on the terrorist list right now, and that's Syria, Iran, North Korea, and Cuba. And I don't think that's pretty broad. I think that's getting it narrowed right down. I'm not able to buy land or minerals in these areas, and I think we should keep them out of Wyoming. Thank you.
So I started to talk a little on this. Part of the testimony we had there, part of the challenges, there's a constitutional issue of discriminating against people that our Constitution forbids. And So we have to research that. If we go into it, we'll try to do it quick and briefly, but there's a lot of interest in it. And I can see it as more of a research education process. The other part is we have no way, no mechanism to do this. We don't even have a hypothetical mechanism. You can't go and look at my corporation, our family farm, and tell who owns it. That's something that only my family would know. And that's throughout the whole state. So that's on the state level. The county level, the clerks just register and record land as it comes in. So to do it, we'd probably have to stand up a whole agency that would research land acquisition or property acquisition. This is property. So my thoughts are it'd be really more than a tough lift. Changing the Constitution would be bad enough in and of itself, and the expense of a whole agency to try to police this thing is also would be a challenge, and I'm not sure we'd get very far, but it would be good to at least understand what the challenges are before we take a deep dive. Did you have anything to add, Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the only thing that's constitutional or unconstitutional, however you want to look at it, is the word resident alien. And we have to decide what that word actually means. If a resident alien, is that somebody from Montana or is that somebody from China? And then also the word resident, does that mean that the person who owned the oil field or the ranch had to live in the state? You know, so there's some things that we do need to look at, but I don't think it's all that we can't overcome. Thank you.
Have more here. Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I have to go along with Senator Kolb. We've got the federal lands in a lot of Wyoming and federal minerals and stuff like that. How do you carve out that? Is where I struggle mostly. If it was all private farmland, that would be something different, but we're a little more diversified across the state, so.
Representative Alderman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, the United States of America cannot sell land to any foreign country. It's in the BLM manual. So if the United States can't, I don't see it as much of a problem that we can't stop these 6 countries. Thank you.
We have some public testimony. Mr. Winnie brought another perspective to it. Go ahead and share with us.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Bill Winnie from Sublette County. I agree with Senator Kolb. It's not easy and not simple, but I also think it is of vast importance to the nation. It ought to be taken on at a national level, but I do not see that in the offing, and there's no reason why multiple states couldn't work on the issue. Any land, even 1 acre, this last session of the bill had a 1 acre exception in it, represents a place where intelligence units can operate. And history kind of gives you an illumination on that. If you go back to World War II and look at the Battle of the Bulge, the way the Germans pulled off that battle without anybody knowing what was coming hardly was they stopped all radio type communications. Everything was done by landline. Well, the intelligence side of this, particularly with us having missile fields right here, is somebody could buy up land and soak up whatever airborne electronic stuff is going on. And if you talk to the security police around F.E. Warren, you find that the local ranchers are some of their best indicators of tip-offs for things going on out in the missile fields that maybe they ought to go look at. But I think the issue is at a national level, and we as a state should support the national level, there's something going on, we have an interest in it, and we ought to work on it. I acknowledge the not easy and not simple point of Senator Kolb, But that doesn't mean it isn't important. So subject to your questions, thank you.
Committee questions? Thank you, sir. Oh, we got a question here. Go ahead, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, it's not a question, it's a comment. Right now, there is 16 states that have some sort of laws on their books stopping ownership of foreign people. And none of them are alike. My research shows everything from farmland in Iowa. Iowa is the toughest. But there is, the last count was either 16 or 19 states that have some sort of foreign ownership laws on their books. Thank you.
Okay. So I guess a question I would have for the bringers of this idea, would it work to whittle her down to ag land and not deal with all foreign ownership of all property? Because that's, if we can do that, we can eliminate the problems we have with the trona mines that are owned by foreign countries that would be on this list. We would do a great deal of harm to that industry. If we do ag lands, we can easily change land classifications and get past that obstacle. I would, if we did this study, I would like to have research ahead of time by the state, by the clerks, on any plan they would have to be able, a mechanism of some kind to be able to even do it, and also some kind of a constitutional expert on whether we can get past what our state constitution says. So I wouldn't mind doing it, but not a whole day. Would you be okay with that? Let's just stick with ag land. Okay, how about Senate? Okay. Next topic.
All
Go
right,
ahead.
go ahead. Well, I think it's a good start, so.
Okay. Okay, see you. All right, so the next topic, yeah, there's a couple of things. Go ahead, Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the next topic that I had proposed was the exchange or transfer of state lands, and I just wanted us to delve into that. We have several bills dealing with that issue this session, and I think we need to take an educational look at that for our new committee, B, a broader look at how we can make that process smoother, streamline the process, especially with our local grazing lessees, so that it doesn't take years to get those transfers done. There's lots of reasons that this is good. It helps a lot of different industries. It helps our ag producers, but it also helps our sportsmen, sportswomen. We have a bill dealing with isolated parcels right now on the House side, and this would help with some of that, make it easier to get those parcels joined up with other large pieces of state land that the public can access. And so I just really want to dig into that and see what we could do to make that process easier for our constituents back home, and also easier for the office, right? I mean, they're bound by certain rules right now and laws, and if we could make that easier for everybody, I think it'd benefit the state greatly. And so that was my impetus in proposing that topic.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hicks.
real quick question on that. So I'm assuming this, the broad of the title is that doesn't just include exchanges or transfers of state lands with private, but it would also include. And so, Madam and Chairman, Mr. Chairman, if we're going to do this, it's been about 6 years ago, the Ag Committee looked at this pretty heavily with all the landlocked parcels and federal parcels that have designations that basically preclude us from, we've got a section in the Grovont Wilderness area and some of these. And so if we're going to do that, I'm aware of the fact that the state of Utah was very successful in getting some federal designated land exchanges through Congress. And so if we're going to do this, we need to pull that back out. I would concur, then we need to look at an expedited process for small exchanges and stuff. It shouldn't take as long as it does. And so I think it's a good topic overall to look at. I just want to make sure it was the intent that we look at the broad component of it. It's not just specifically state and private. It's the whole package.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in response to that, Senator Hicks, I'm happy to do that. I mean, I was actually probably a little more laser focused on actually the private and state exchanges, but I'm happy to make it a broader topic. We might as, if we're doing it, let's do that. I have no problem with that.
As we were working on some of the interim topics from last year we haven't got all of that across the finish line. And I guess I would just like to throw in the continued topic of remedies for state lands, how we deal with some of the problems we've run into, and throw that into the mix, if that'd be okay, in case we have bills that don't get across the finish line. We can further tune them up. Any okay with that idea? So it'll be a fairly broad topic on state lands, but an emphasis on exchanges. Okay, what's next?
Mr. Chairman, I think we've dealt with the next two on page 5, which are the College of Ag endowments, 2 of those. So we'd be on to page 6, and that would be the partnership for marketing of the Wyoming State Fair brought by the Department of Ag. And did you want to bring the director up? It looks like he's here.
Yeah. I'd like for the committee to also, yes, Courtney, come on up. And others, thank you for coming to our meeting.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Doug Miyamoto with the Department of Agriculture, and with me today I have Diane Schober with the Wyoming Office of Tourism and Courtney Conkle, who is General Manager of the Wyoming State Fair. So I guess this topic would fall more under that silo of updates, letting you know as a committee what we're up to as a partnership between the Department of Agriculture, the Wyoming Office of Tourism, and Wyoming State Fair. We have a fairly complex system that we're employing for all of our marketing efforts, and there's a lot of play between the municipality, the county, the Office of Tourism, and State Fair. And so our idea was to simply provide as much information as we could to let this committee and anybody else who's interested know our model for that. With that, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it over to my colleagues here to provide any more insight that they have from their specific viewpoint on this topic and what we propose to do.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, we have a very unique ecosystem for how our marketing efforts work at the Wyoming State Fair. And that consists of partnerships between the organizations that you see in front of you today, as well as the Converse County Tourism Board and other local and regional entities that we work with to maximize our reach across the state. We also have some really unique things that are going to come into play in 2023 and 2024 with some installations and some joint projects that are currently in development that we're excited to share more with you in depth at a later date when we've got a little bit more time to dive into that. But I think with it being such an intricate and fairly recent system, when you look at the last 5 years of development, we just want to be as transparent as possible and take the time to help you better understand our efforts. And we're always open to advice and suggestions about how we can continue to improve as well.
Committee.
Ms.
Yeah.
Director Schober had a comment, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I'm sorry, Diane. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee, Diane Schober, Wyoming Office of Tourism. I just want to echo what both Director Miyamoto and Ms. Conkle have added. We're pleased to be a part of this partnership. And I feel like that 5 years ago when the state fair legislation for establishing the board and the entity was put into place, we've built a lot on that, and we're anxious to share with you in a much longer format, not too long, of course, but in a longer format, the efforts that are happening, and as Courtney alluded to, the plans that we have going forward too. So thank you for your time and consideration of this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a general question. Could you move the fair and move it around the state? Is there some sort of prohibition against that? I mean, we have a lot of places and you're in one corner of the state and I thought, well, maybe just as a general, I'm sorry, it's probably off topic, but just what's your opinion about that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Senator, one of the situations that we have is the Wyoming State Fairgrounds is that the property itself was actually deeded back in the early 1900s. So there's 5 families that stepped forward that deeded their properties with the caveat that in the event that the state fair did not happen on the state fairgrounds in Converse County for 3 consecutive years, that the properties would deed back to those next of kin now. And so that puts us in a predicament where we really can't move it around. And it's one of the reasons why we fought so hard to have the fair in 2020 and 2021, because we were concerned about that 3-year caveat.
So the state has invested a great deal of infrastructure to assure that what needs to happen can happen there in buildings and what have you, and dormitories, because it brings in a lot of people, and it would be a tough lift. But it'd be fine, but I don't know of any state that's ever really tried that. We'll discuss it further if we add this to our topics, I think.
Mr. Chairman, I think it'd be a great update. That was a pretty substantial change that we made 5 years ago, and this committee worked very hard on that. There's not a lot of us remaining that were here at that time. I think Senator Larson and yourself and myself are probably the only ones left. So, and maybe Representative Winter, but I think it would be a great update and information for the committee going forward.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was here, but I was chairing transportation, and I can remember the conversation, and it seemed that the state fair was somewhat of a fragile situation, and it has become a polished gem since then.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Minnie's okay with that, adding that to our list of more education than anything else, I would guess. Okay. So let me explain this next one, ag enhancements, and we've got a long enough list that I think I'd like to see an emphasis done on vertical farming. The state of Wyoming has become a leader in the nation. We've got a company that in Laramie that received some business council funds to continue. It began as a research, I'm trying to think of the man's name, Nate Story, I believe. And we'll try to talk with him and see if he could come and share some things that he's learned. But he began as a researcher, moved into the private sector afterwards in Laramie, and now it's a global organization with I think you'd call them kind of research labs all over the place. And the reason I'd like to study it is it probably addresses our main problems in Wyoming. One of them is water. I think you can run these vertical farms on small wells without a great appropriation. That's part of what we'd have to study, is how much water would have to be appropriated to water these vertical farms. Our climate, it isn't good for much other than good forage and grazing and what have you. It seems like even with irrigation, we can do a few crops, but none of the vegetable farming and things that could change a lot in a vertical farm. And then the other thing is workforce. The state of Wyoming doesn't have the workforce but we might be able to, it would be good to study these things, see if it'd be an enhancement to the small family farm in Wyoming, and keep some of our young people home rather than sending them off. But that would be the emphasis, and maybe a few other things that could be used as just ideas that agriculture could be increased in Wyoming. Chairman Steinman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was wondering if we could roll that in with our University of Wyoming agriculture projects there. I know that, I think you're referring to Plenty, which was the company that was started there, and is moving back, and so it might be a nice dovetail with the UW projects and the tour in Laramie.
I think that was kind of what I had thought we'd do. And also, while we're at it, do a tour of the brucellosis lab, and maybe, if we can, it's a biosecured area. Find out if we can do that and continue education with brucellosis. We got someone, go ahead. Representative Davis.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, my only question, and maybe not knowing enough on this subject, is what point of development are they at there? Are they in the groundbreaking stage, or have they already got something put together? Or is it operating? That's my question. Are we looking at this a little too soon?
I don't know. That's why I want to look at it, see what we can learn. The state of Wyoming has, our SLIB board has decided it's worth investing more into. And I believe the owner would probably be open. I can be very, very convincing that a tour to his facility would be a great benefit to Wyoming. I think it'd fit right in with what we're trying to do with the university as well. John, Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair. I think it'd be a really good idea to incorporate that somehow into a meeting in Laramie to discuss along with these other topics. I have no idea what this looks like, this vertical farming, but it certainly might benefit the state of Wyoming.
Representative Davis.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Chairman, there is something going on up there in Jackson that on the conservation district side that we did go see 6-7 years ago up there in Jackson that was operating and does apparently supply a lot of fresh vegetables up there in Jackson, so.
We might try to incorporate that in a virtual setting during that meeting in Laramie is what I'm thinking. There's also a dairy in my country in which they're partnering with a company. They build these shelves and they sprout grain and produce quite a bit of feed for their dairy animals. And it's gone broke, and that's part of why I want to study this, see how expensive this is, see if it's financially feasible to even suggest that Wyoming producers go into something like that. They're going to probably take it up on their own, but I think we could get them to come and discuss that, the forage production for livestock herds, dairies, feedlots, and different things as well. Good with adding it. It'd probably not result in legislation. It'd be just some more education. Okay, Representative Schlegel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I had ran HB 106 to reinstate the moratorium on eminent domain this year, and that did pass both houses and then was vetoed by the governor. We tried a veto override, and that actually failed in the House. So I'm bringing this bill. I think eminent domain is something we need to look at. Karen Bud Phelan has talked about the need for that as well, and I think she would be willing to help the committee on that as we look at eminent domain on the committee. And I'd put 6 to 8 hours on this, like Chairman Steinmetz had mentioned. I had really no clue, and looking at how some of our topics went as we were discussing topics in our committee here, I just took a guess, so I don't have any clue how much time that would actually take. Be open for any other comments, but that's kind of what I was proposing. I really feel that the use of eminent domain is really a taking of private property rights and needs to be looked at.
Senator Kolb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I certainly would, I think it'd be in favor of educating on the issue. I think it is a huge question here about why we have this ability. And I think the challenge, obviously it's failed. It's failed on a number of levels, but I think it's worthwhile though to understand why it's important. And with that, as to have another bill take time on this, I don't agree with that. But I think definitely an education on why this even exists. I mean, what's the purpose of this? I certainly would like to hear the actual the main issues when it comes to why it's available now for condemnation under an eminent domain. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I too would be in favor. We've also submitted this to the Corporations Committee, so I think we'll need to work with them and decide who's going to take this up. So maybe you and I can visit with them and make sure that we're not doing double work on it, but it's definitely a very important issue, especially in our area that we represent. And we were disappointed to see the bill vetoed. So definitely on and for the topic.
We had this law in place and used it once, so it was necessary to do it to keep from, so the collector lines are the issue, and you can condemn that land and only, there'd be very few beneficiaries of it. In this case, we're talking that Chairman Steinmetz and Representative Schlegel are in, it would be the state land that would, our state of Wyoming would be the only beneficiary of what's being done there. So that's the way I read it anyway. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. After what went on in the House yesterday, I think it's really a really important issue relative to private land. And I was really disappointed that the governor did veto that, but with what else went on after the session yesterday, we need to do something to bring this to the attention of folks. Private land is so important, especially to this state, and we need to do what we can to change the direction that's going. Thank you.
Davis, I think I skipped something too. I know, I'm sorry. I'm jumping around and not paying attention to what we're doing, but.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chair, I too think this is a very important issue here, because if it's private industry that's benefiting from this condemnation, that's where my question is, Anyway.
Yeah, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I come from this point of view from 8 years of being a commissioner and dealing with land use issues and dealing with a potential situation where you can have a landowner stop a multi-billion-dollar project that benefits the state of Wyoming. That's my issue with it. I don't disagree that it's an issue. My point is that there's a balance between what it does for the state against an individual who may be just adversarial to stop a multi-billion-dollar project. We had this actual situation in Sweetwater. So that's where I'm coming from. It's not that I disagree that we don't want it abused, but I think we have to be very careful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Senator Steinmetz.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
agree
Chairman.
with that for
Yeah,
sure.
it sounds like it's a good topic to look at for the committee for both sides of the issue. And with that, I don't know how you want to deal with it, if you need a vote or if you just want to make a decision, but keep us moving along since we have to
about
be
we-
in session.
How about we plan on adding that as some of the education that needs to happen, probably by this committee especially, because it affects it affects a fairly large area, and there has to be a balance, I agree. One hard-headed old feller could stop something that's hugely beneficial to an area as well. And I apologize to everybody, I kind of skipped over this topic of water law. We suggested that as just and I don't think it would take 2 hours, but I'd like, go ahead, Senator Chairman Steinmetz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't mean to interrupt you if
No,
you had
that's
more to
okay.
say. All right. So in the Senate Ag Committee, we talked about this. We would really like to have a joint meeting with Select Water, the Ag Committee, and I think CSG West will be in Pinedale as well, dealing with some of the Colorado River issues. And so what we would like to propose is that we meet jointly with Select Water, do some water law training, and also have an update on our aging irrigation infrastructure, that survey that we're having done and that study, if we can get an update on that. And so that was what the Senate would like to propose for that topic.
Okay, is the committee okay with that? We'll try to do the training together with Select Water at some point in time. Good idea. All right. The brucellosis we've kind of covered. That'll probably happen at the University of Wyoming if we are able to tour that lab, and also with I don't know when we'll fit in the legislation part and reviewing how much money is available and may be needed for brucellosis mitigation.
We did horse and burrow,
We did those, yeah.
so we'll do this now.
Yes. He's not here. Does anybody know very much about? I should have checked with Chris before I got here. Let me just read what the recommendation is to our committee. It was brought by Representative Knapp. Before entering into an agreement or a contract to sell or otherwise grant property to the United States, the owner of the property shall, not less than 45 days before entering into agreement or contract, provide notice in writing to the director and the board that includes notice of the purchase agreement or contracts, details of the property to be conveyed in the agreement or contract, the appraised value of the property, if known, and the agreed upon purchase price of the property. The purchase of land by Wyoming otherwise going to the federal government can be included in land use planning, access, and mineral rights. Sounds like we might have some pieces of this we'd work on with the foreign ownership and as well as the land exchange topic that's before us. I'll find out more about it, see if it'll fit into those other categories we have. This would be more of an information and education. Yes, Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was my understanding that there was a situation up in Campbell County where the federal government was buying property up there, and that's where this came from, is my understanding.
All right. I was unaware of that, so thank you.
Okay, we dealt with the next one.
Yeah. Jonathan's not here.
Mr. Chairman, Jonathan Downing is here. If you'd like to have him come up and present
are.
the study of Wyoming food labeling requirements.
Good morning, members of committee, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan Downing, representing Colorado Wyoming Petroleum Marketers Association. And this topic is brought to you by one of our members who is a small grocer here in Wyoming. With respect to food labeling requirements, under the food labeling requirements, we're mainly asking that the committee take a look at the threshold within the current statutes. Retailers defined by the Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act of 1930 refers only to retailers handling fresh and frozen fruits and vegetables with an invoice value of at least $230,000 annually. Those retailers are required to be licensed under that act. And smaller grocers in Wyoming are required to submit labeling requirements where other stores are not. And the concern with the act is taking a look at, with respect to Wyoming's interactions with USDA or Department of Ag with food labeling, would there be a potential remedy to get out from under some of those regulatory pressures for those smaller grocers? And while we were over in the Senate committee yesterday, somebody had coined the nice phrase, the Small Grocer Food Freedom Act. And so just throw that on the table. This is my, don't get in front of Ag Committee that often, but enjoying the hospitality. And as likewise with this issue, we would be happy to get some locals present to be able to share what they're dealing with as far as with the labeling requirements.
Any questions? Comments?
Mr. Chair,
Representative-
Madam Chair, this may roll right into your vertical farming. You know, it might be a way to disperse this out to the smaller retailers.
Yeah.
So I think this would stand some merit to look at, in my opinion. If we can reduce regulations, that would be a good idea, in my opinion.
How big are the grocers that you're?
Mr. Chairman, the one that had brought this issue up had been more of an independent, smaller grocer, actually over near Representative Davis's neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I think as we see big grocers consolidating down into one big monopoly, I think the independent grocers may have a tremendous opportunity throughout the nation to flourish right now. We might be able to incorporate it into vertical farming if the committee's okay with continuing this, and it'd probably be at the Laramie meeting. Okay, more food freedom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I think,
The next one is mine, Mr. Chairman.
go ahead, Chairman.
So I was wanting to just look at composting and disposal of offal and the regulations regarding our meat processing infrastructure in the state of Wyoming. As you all know, we did a lot of work on that through COVID, and I'd like to get some updates on that to see how the industry is doing across the state, as well as look at other ways of disposal of some of our waste products from that industry. I know the University of Wyoming has a robust composting unit and a person in charge of that over there. It might be something that we could roll into when we're over there, should the committee decide to take it up. I think it's an important industry for our producers across the state, and would stand for questions on that.
Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, this is a huge issue with our small time processing plants. I know even our communities over there in our area where if you had a deceased animal, you used to be able to haul it to the landfill, and now you can't. You have to, I mean, so this definitely has far-reaching issues here. So I think it'd be good to study this one.
Yeah, not many years ago, we had rendering plants that if you had feedlot disaster, well, even an animal or two, you could call them up and they would gladly take them off your hands. Now we don't seem to have that in the area.
Right, yeah.
Okay, we'll add that probably deep, I don't know when, but somewhere in here.
All right, that sounds good. And then we had one more thing we just wanted to add, Mr. Chairman. And we just wanted to add kind of a catch-all, anything that requires further review with our agencies in case something would come up in the interim that none of us anticipate, then we have room and management council would know that if our agencies bring us something during the interim, we just would add that to our list. We all know things come up and we want to make sure we have a catch-all provision. If that would be acceptable to the House.
Looks like that'll work.
Very agreeable.
Yes, we are. We're ready to take on everything.
All right, Mr. Chairman, and I wanted to welcome our new attorney, Anna, is that correct? To the, to the Ag Committee, welcome, and we look forward to working with you, and we're thankful for Linda and Pierre who have helped us through this session, and so with that, Mr. Chairman, I think on the Senate side, we're taken care of.
Okay, and I'd like to thank you to Mark and Denise Knotts, who took care of the House secretarial jobs and helped us out. I think a lot of this was typed up by our secretaries, and we just have a huge debt to the session help that came. Thank you for helping us. I guess this meeting is adjourned, and we will be going into a joint conference meeting upstairs in the west. I think 110 is the one that we're scheduled to be at. So as soon as we can get there, anybody on that committee will see you there. Thank you, people.